I would like to introduce Michael Sanderson.
Good morning, Board. Welcome, Ross. This question relates to domestic macroeconomy and its impact on bank profit going forward. National private debt currently exceeds 120% of GDP, the second highest in the OECD, meaning the economy has little capacity to take on further credit. The mid-year economic fiscal outlook released 2 days ago shows no economic positives. The economy is not strong and continuous growth is unsustainable. The currency issuing federal government, both franchises, persist in describing our economy as if they were currency users. We have an economy that is tanking, a housing market that has been inflated to the point of collapse. The federal government, again both franchises, use the misery of unemployment by NAIRU, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, as an economic buffer stock. The federal government could use NAIBER, non-accelerating inflation buffer, unemployment ratio, as a buffer stock. NAIBER would enable a voluntary, local administrated job guarantee that pays a living income which would employ approximately 2 million unemployed and underemployed, boosting the private sector, breathing life back into dying communities, addressing poverty, build skills, improve work ethics, recession-proof the Australian economy, and so much more. A job guarantee would also act as a counter-cyclic, bottom-up, federal fiscal stabiliser. My questions are, from the perspective of the bank, I'll start again. From the perspective of bank profit, if the NAB had to choose between NAIRU and NAIBER, which would it choose and why? And who from the board is attending the Sustainable Prosperity Conference in Adelaide from the 10th to the 12th of January to meet and listen to Stephanie Kelton, the financial advisor to the next US President, Bernie Sanders?
Thank you. I'm not aware of any directors attending the conference in Adelaide.
So perhaps that should be a priority.
It might be. I will raise that, and I hadn't been aware of it. I acknowledge a number of items you've raised. There's no doubt, for example, that the level of private debt in Australia is high relative to many other OECD countries. I absolutely acknowledge that. And therefore,
everyone except Switzerland, so second highest.
So future rates of growth and credit, which we saw a lot over the last 30 years, growth and credit in excess of GDP is not likely to occur. I absolutely understand that. The idea that the economy is tanking is not something that I agree with, and I think it's important to look at the Australian economy, that while our rate of growth is below the trend of much of the last 20 or 30 years, it is still a rate of growth that would be the envy of many more mature, low-growth economies in the Northern Hemisphere. Indeed, in comments I've made elsewhere, I worry that talking about a crisis in the economy itself has a negative effect on what could be a very positive time for Australia. The reality is that inflation is very low, and that doesn't necessarily have to be seen as a problem. Economic growth is below trend, but is still only just below 2%. And we have unemployment at rates of around 5%. Now, I take your point that 5% is not a particularly helpful number if you are one of the 5%, and therefore it has its impacts. But it is certainly significantly lower than that's been associated with weak economies. Indeed, our own experience in 91 too, and the experience of many of the other Western economies during the global financial crisis. So I am interested in the points you've raised. I'm not familiar with the concept of NAIBER, but I'm, as an old economist, very keen to read about it, and perhaps that can inform my summer reading.
I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.